Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, and today we are back to do a video that so many of you have asked for. So many of you wanted to know my thoughts about the differences and similarities between the 5th gen 4Runner and the 2nd gen Lexus GX. As you know, if you've been with me here on the channel, we own both these cars. Currently, these are sitting side by side in the garage. I drive both of these on a daily basis, and a lot of you, I think, wanted to know which one would I buy, for what reasons? Or if you have a 4Runner, should you consider and think about upgrading to a brand new V8 GX while you still can get one before they go out of production, which will happen at the end of this year? Now, the way I'm going to set this up for you is by running through 5 categories that are how I would personally break down the experience of owning and driving both these cars. And once we talk through each and we've gone through the good and the bad and the ugly and everything in between, we'll assign each a winner. And I've got a little scorecard that I'll put up on screen here that we'll look at throughout the course of this video. Now, before we dive into this, my 4Runner, as some of you guys know, is a TRD Pro, which is, just because of the mechanicals underneath, very different from other 4Runners in the lineup and very different from this GX. So what I'm going to do for the sake of this video is ignore some of the TRD Pro specific things in that car and pretend like I own a 4Runner Limited, which is, again, much more similar to the Lexus GX in terms of its overall mechanical underpinnings and behavior out on the road. And finally, before we dive in here, let me be very clear about something before I get a bunch of crap in the comments. This video is either for people who own a 4Runner or are considering, again, a 4Runner or a GX, and you already know all the shortcomings that these vehicles have. You give up a lot by buying either one of these cars, but that is, for some people, the big draw of both these cars. All right, so starting out our comparison, we're going to start with size, because this is actually one of the things that was most surprising to me when I took delivery and started driving this GX as a daily driver. And I've driven GXs in the past, so this was not a completely foreign or new experience for me, but I will say that one of the biggest surprises, having both in the garage side by side and literally sometimes getting out of the 4Runner and into the GX, like, you know, right away without even going inside the house, is that there is a substantial size difference and just kind of overall space difference between the 4Runner and the GX. You don't notice it, I will say, if you, for example, go and drive a 4Runner one day and then a couple days later you drive a GX. Not that noticeable there, because they are very similar in size, but the GX is wider, it is longer, it is taller. The GX is even taller, actually, than my TRD Pro 4Runner, which is by itself 2 inches taller than a standard like SR5 or limited grade 4Runner. So that car rides higher than a normal 4Runner, and this GX, which does not have the air suspension, so it's always just at one ride height, is still taller than that. And I personally really like that. Now, the other thing that was really interesting, getting the GX and 4Runner side by side and then again pulling them into our garages, which, if you've seen our house, we don't have one big garage door, we have 2 individual garage doors, which means we have a real narrow opening on either side. This GX, I didn't realize how much wider it was until I tried to pull it into this garage space behind me, and I had to use the power folding mirrors to fold them in before I could fit it through that doorway there. The 4Runner, on the other hand, I can pull in and out of either of these garage door openings without folding the mirrors. So again, it is a much wider car in the GX. Now, the benefit of the 4Runner being narrower is narrower means nimbler. So on the trail, out on the road, or even if you're going through, maybe you live in a city and you go through a lot of different alleyways. 4Runner is not exactly the car I'd buy in the city anyway, but if you do, and if that's what you like, and you care about having a narrower car, the 4Runner is the one that you're going to want to go with, because it just feels, out on the road and just kind of maneuvering around, whether on-road or off-road, it does feel like it can get through more spaces, more narrow pathways than this GX can. This GX definitely has more of a Tahoe-like kind of feeling about its size and its weight and its mass. So some people are really going to like that about the GX, but the 4Runner, again, definitely has a place because of its size. All right, moving on now to practicality, and here I'm just going to give it right up front to the 4Runner. Even though I just said that the GX is wider longer and taller than the 4Runner, meaning that you have more usable cargo space. I'm going to give it to the 4Runner right up front because the 4Runner is a workhorse. It is just an incredible little work truck. I have done so much with my 4Runner, using it like a truck, and it does so well with that. My problem with the GX, and the reason that we're not giving practicality to the GX here, is because everything in here feels more precious. Things like the headliner. We have this absolutely beautiful cashmere feeling headliner. Our car obviously has the ecru interior, which was a must-have for me because I love the look of this light kind of creamy beige colored interior. So things in here, again, will get scuffed, they feel more precious. We have the gray sapel wood with aluminum inlay trim, which is, again, gorgeous in this car. And we have a Premium Plus. Okay, so we don't have the luxury trim. So even more so, if you were to get the luxury trim, I would really think about using this as a work truck and as a kind of utility everything hauler, the way I use my 4Runner. It's kind of like my Rolex, which I do daily drive both my sub and this GX, but there are places where I won't take either one of these because I don't want to thrash them and get them completely trashed. And same thing with our dog. Honestly, if you have a dog, really truly consider the 4Runner, because the thing about the GX and the hallmark feature that you get in the 4Runner is that roll down rear window. And I'll tell you, I've taken our dog in the GX on a few 100-degree days because we have third row climate vents right up there, and she legitimately gets mad and upset that the back window, the back hatch in this GX does not roll down, and I don't drive with that thing open. So that's why we're going to give utility and practicality to the 4Runner by default. All right, next up, let's talk about build and material quality. And chances are, if you're looking at one of these two cars, this is probably the main reason that you want them. You want something that came out of Toyota's storied and legendary Tahara plant, because the Tahara plant truly does represent the best of the best when it comes to Toyota build and reliability and quality and fit and finish. Everything that comes out of the Tahara plant is truly, again, the best that you can get from Toyota. In addition to that, both the 4Runner and the GX have the distinction of having 100% parts content from Japan. So that militant, anal retentive, attention to detail, the obsessive nature with quality and perfection that you get from the Japanese, 100% of the parts content and quality and materials and fit and finish and final build and assembly in these cars has that. And that, it just shows when you drive these cars. You can feel the difference, honestly, between an American or North American made Toyota and a car that has come out of the Tahara plant or any of the other Japanese plants. And I love that about, again, both the 4Runner and this GX. And on top of that, if you've watched any of my other videos where I've talked about the quality of some of these new cars, I really feel like both Toyota and Lexus's standard for quality and material finish and all that kind of thing have fallen rather drastically in the last few years. So even with the Japan-made cars, like if you get into a new Crown or a new Prius or a new NX, for example, that came from Japan, the plastics don't feel as good. They're still great quality, don't get me wrong, but they don't feel the same way that the plastics in this GX and that 4Runner, the way that they feel. These cars truly feel like they are built to last a lifetime, and a lot of that is because of the material quality and final assembly of these vehicles. It is incredible. And here we're actually going to give them a tie because they come off the same line. They come out of the same plant. The suppliers are pretty much the same for a lot of the materials and such in this car, so it makes sense that they would both be built to the highest standard. So again, we're going to give it a tie. They both are equally great in this respect. All right, next up, let's talk engines and efficiency. And although this is one of the biggest differences on paper between the GX and the 4Runner, and one of the reasons, I think, the biggest reasons people will choose one over the other, you might be surprised to hear that, in my opinion, this is actually one of the smaller differences between these two trucks. Now, yes, the 1UR-FE V8 and 6-speed auto in the GX are definite upgrades over the 1GR V6 and 5-speed auto in the 4Runner. However, both are about 7 to 8 seconds 0 to 60, and fuel economy is also the same at about 14 to 16 in mixed driving. Now, The GX, because of that sixth gear, can do up to 20 or even 21 sometimes on the highway. However, that extra mileage on the highway doesn't translate to fuel savings because the GX requires at a minimum 91 octane. So you are paying the premium penalty in the GX where you are not in the 4Runner, which is perfectly happy with regular fuel. Now, the GX does definitely give you a much more robust and rich feeling out on the road underway with the V8 engine, because there's just a feeling of a V8 that you cannot replicate. No matter how good or how much power you make out of a supercharged or turbocharged or hybrid 6, you still just cannot replicate that robust feeling of having so much steam under the hood in a V8 car. I am going to have to give the point to the GX for the sake of this comparison because of the V8. Again, because of that naturally aspirated, beautiful, creamy, so much power and steam under the hood feeling in the V8, the GX has to win this category. Now, let's move on to refinement, comfort, and drive. And here's where we're going to pick up on that V8 story, because the way that we gave utility and practicality to the 4Runner by default, I'm going to give drive, refinement, and comfort to the GX by default, because hands down, if you watched the intro video where I first introduced you to this car, this is the smoothest car I have ever driven. It really does truly feel like you're driving a Lexus LS. And the LS is, again, the smoothest car out there, even more so than Mercedes S-Class and Audi A8 and all that kind of thing. The LS has always been the smoothest, most comfortable, most refined driving experience you can get out on the road. And it is shocking to me how much of that comes through in the GX, because this is not a grand touring luxury sedan. This is a body on frame truck. And yet it is the smoothest car I have ever driven, hands down. I even took this earlier this week on a 3-hour road trip. So 3 hours each way to and from Dallas. And I could not believe, you guys, how smooth this car rides on the highway for extended periods of time. Someone in the comments actually said and described the ride of this car as being like a limousine, and I could not agree more with that. It is not, again, fast. It is not exhilarating. It is just so comfortable, so smooth, so refined, so relaxed. 3 hours in this car went by like that because it was just so incredibly smooth, so refined, so comfortable. Now, with all that said, the 4Runner does not have a bad drive by any means. I would absolutely describe the ride of that car as being comfortable. It is not like driving a Wrangler with a solid front axle and you're feeling every little bump and undulation on the road. It still has a very nice drive, but I would never call the ride in the 4Runner refined in any way. And again, some people are really going to like that. If you want to feel like you're driving a truck and you want to feel just all that truckiness, the GX might actually not be for you, because this is going to drive much more like a luxury car, a luxury touring sedan, honestly, than the 4Runner will, which does always, again, feel like a truck. You feel so much more coming through the wheel and the seats and the pedals, and you're always hearing the engine. There is actually something really nice about that when you're driving the 4Runner, and if you like that, that's your boy. But for me, I'm going to give the point here to the GX because, again, just by default, this is the most comfortable, most refined, most smooth, most just effortless driving experience I've ever had in any car that we've ever owned, and many cars that we've ever driven, for that matter. All right, and finally, let's talk capability. Now, I'm going to tell you right up front, I am not an overlander. I am not an off-roader. I go off-road sometimes. We will do trips up to Colorado, and there are places here in Texas where you can off-road, but I am not the expert when it comes to anything to do with off-roading and capability. So here's how I'm going to approach it for the sake of this comparison. What I'm going to tell you here is that if you want to take your car off-road, and that's going to be a big part of the way that you will use either one of these trucks that you buy the 4Runner, straight up, buy the 4Runner for off-road capability. And here's why. Because the GX is a very capable off-roader, and it can definitely do cottage trails and all that kind of thing. But if you want to get the same level of capability that you can get in a 4Runner, in a GX, you have to buy the luxury trim, and then you have to add an off-road package on top of that to get the same multi-terrain select and crawl control that you get just, on most 4Runners, that I think you can even get as cheap as maybe $44,000 on a 4Runner TRD off-road. So that is a $30,000 difference between getting, multi-terrain select and crawl control on a 4Runner versus a GX. And I just think it's stupid to spend that much on a GX to go off-roading, because on top of that, you also have to consider that the GX is not designed, meaning the sculptural design and the bumpers of this car, you're going to then have to spend another at least 10 grand to outfit this car with metal bumpers, maybe raise it up a few inches, improve your departure and approach angles. And now, let's say we do spend 10 grand on that. Now we're at like 85 for a GX. And to me, I would much rather have a TRD off-road 4Runner for, let's say, 45 grand. And you could spend the extra 40 grand that you didn't spend outfitting this car and buying this car on a second daily driver to take on road. So you could even buy like a really nice Accord or a Camry or a RAV4 hybrid or something like that to drive around, use that as your daily driver, get incredible efficiency, and have a second car for the same price with that 4Runner that you can take off-road and into the mountains and all that kind of thing. So that's where I fall in terms of capability. And again, here I'm going to give it to the 4Runner because there's just no beating the capability of the 4Runner. And because of how many trims there are in the lineup, you can get pretty much everything in the 4Runner, from full-time four-wheel drive in the Limited, like what we have here. So if you want on-road driving, that's the one you're going to get. If you want off-road prowess, go with the TRD Off-Road, TRD Pro, and there's even now an on-road TRD version called the TRD Sport, which I don't really see the point of because that one still has part-time four-wheel drive. But all that to say, there's so much on offer from the 5th Gen 4Runner currently for every kind of person out there. So 4Runner's the winner there. All right, so by now, I think it should be pretty clear that these are two amazing, old-school, legendary dinosaur trucks that still definitely have a place in the market today and are still very much worth buying, even at their advanced ages, because once these go away, it is going to be the end of an era for mid-size body and frame SUVs. Everything is going to be a Turbo 6, a Turbo 4. We're going to lose the amazing old school build quality and all the kinds of things that we talked about that make these cars so amazing. And when we add up our tally sheet, we actually end up with a straight tie with each of them earning 4 points on our score sheet, which should tell you a lot about how I feel about both these cars. So many of you said once you get the GX you're gonna hate the 4Runner and all this kind of thing, and that's just not the case, because I really do truly feel that they are very similar cars, but much like the NX and the RAV4, they are very similar cars that do so many things differently and so many things better than the other that they don't become redundant to one another. Now let's talk about upgrading. So if you already own a 4Runner, should you consider upgrading to a GX while you still can in the next few months before production ends? And I think if you own a 4Runner Limited, you absolutely should, without a question, without a doubt, because the GX very much is a 4Runner Limited, but better. It's got the bigger engine and the same four-wheel drive system. If you bought the Limited to begin with, chances are you didn't buy that for off-road capability. You bought it for on-road driving, which is, again, where the GX excels. However, I don't know if you should upgrade to a GX if you currently own a TRD Pro 4Runner or a TRD Off-Road 4Runner. And the reason being, you're going to give up some capability. You're going to give up some of that utility and that practicality that we talked about. The 4Runner being a car that you can take out into the mountains and get dirty and trash and thrash. Your 4Runner can do that. I don't know if you'd want to do that with a GX like this, because it's going to have to be a much more luxurious, more precious vehicle than what you currently own. And then finally, if you have an SR5, you have two options here. I would highly recommend upgrading to something from your SR5 if you can afford to do so, but I would really think about whether you want to upgrade to the luxury track and the on-road track, as is in this GX, or if you want to upgrade to a TRD Pro 4Runner to give you that off-road capability. Because I think, again, the GX, once you get to the top of the range, so a GX or a 4Runner TRD of any kind, they're very different cars. Either way you go, from an SR5, you're going to get the same amazing build quality, amazing materials, beautiful naturally aspirated engines under the hood of both the 4Runner and the GX. And at the end of that ownership term, whenever that may be, if there is an end to that ownership term for you, you're going to be able to sell either one of them for top dollar, because by that point, both the current GX and the current 4Runner will have gone away, and I'm pretty sure will be very, very desirable on the pre-owned market. So That's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope it answered all the questions that you all had for me about how we feel having owned and currently owning both these cars. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you all soon. Have a great one and take care.